old, a senator from California, having previously served 8 years as either the chairman or ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee. He had been the face of the Democratic opposition to Trump, the man who had led the first impeachment, and who had appeared on CNN and MSNBC almost weekly for 6 years to explain classified matters to the American people. He had authored a best-selling book titled Midnight in Washington about defending democracy, and had won his Senate seat in a landslide victory just 2 years prior. He sat at the witness table dressed in a dark suit and wearing his signature serious expression. Yet, there was a noticeable tension in his posture now, his hands gripping the edge of the table tightly. His lawyers had been forced to wait outside as they did not possess the necessary security clearances to enter this facility. He was alone, facing J.D. Vance across the secure conference table. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, and, as President of the Senate, constitutionally empowered to preside over this hearing. Vance was 42 years old, a former Marine, a former venture capitalist, a former senator from Ohio, and before all of that, a prosecutor who understood how to construct cases and present evidence. Behind Vance sat 3 individuals who made Schiff's blood run cold: NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell, FBI Director Christopher Wray, and Director of National Intelligence Admiral James Reynolds, all of whom had thick binders in front of them, and all of whom looked grim. The committee members appeared serious as well, including Chairman Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia who had been briefed yesterday on what was to unfold, and Vice Chairman Marco Rubio, a Republican from Florida. 6 other senators from both parties were present, all looking as though they would rather be anywhere else, but knowing that this was too important a matter to avoid. Schiff attempted to answer Vance's question, his voice sounding defensive, as he stated that he speaks with many journalists as part of his oversight responsibilities, and that it is part of his job as a member of the Intelligence Committee to help the public understand. "Let me assist your memory," Vance interrupted smoothly, reaching forward to press a button on the secure audio system built into the conference table. The speakers crackled to life, and Adam Schiff's voice, crystal clear and unmistakable, filled the room. "Jake, what I am about to tell you is highly classified, but the American people need to know. The intelligence on Ukraine is damning." Schiff's recorded voice continued, stating that Trump personally pressured Zelensky to investigate Biden and that they had intercepts and testimony from intelligence community officials. "The evidence is overwhelming. The recording played. This is worse than what we have said publicly." Jake Tapper's voice responded on the tape, asking, "Can I report this? Can I attribute it?" Schiff's voice was heard again, instructing, "Not attributed to me directly. Use sources familiar with the intelligence or officials who have seen the classified briefings." The recording continued with Schiff saying, "I will confirm on background if your editors need verification before running it. But this needs to get out before the Senate trial starts. The American people need to understand what Trump actually did." Tapper replied, "I can work with that. When can we air it?" Schiff responded, "Tonight if possible, tomorrow at the latest. The Senate vote is coming, and this information could matter." Vance stopped the playback, and the silence that followed was even heavier than before. Several committee members looked physically ill. Senator Warner's face had gone pale, and even Senator Tom Cotton, the Arkansas Republican who had been skeptical about this hearing, looked shocked at actually hearing it. That was the voice of a sitting United States senator leaking classified intelligence to CNN on a recorded phone call, instructing the journalist on how to disguise the source and coordinating the timing to influence political proceedings. The evidence was undeniable. Schiff's face had lost all color. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound emerged, and his hands trembled slightly against the table edge. Vance allowed the moment to breathe, letting the recording sink in fully, before he spoke again, his voice still calm, but now carrying an edge of steel underneath. That is your voice, Senator Schiff. On December 18, 2019, leaking classified intelligence about Ukraine to CNN anchor Jake Tapper. Intelligence you received the day before in a classified briefing restricted to members of the House Intelligence Committee. Vance continued, "You are telling him the specific contents of classified intercepts. You are instructing him to disguise you as anonymous sources, and you are coordinating the timing to influence the Senate impeachment trial." He paused and added, "And that is just one call, one example. We have 17 recorded phone conversations between you and journalists over a 5-year period." Vance stated, "We have 83 separate leaks of classified intelligence that we have matched to briefings you attended. Every single one appeared in the news media within 72 hours of you receiving the information." He continued listing the evidence. "We have financial records showing that CNN's parent company, Warner Media, paid you $2.1 million for a book deal immediately after you became their most valuable source of classified information. Furthermore," Vance noted, "we have documentary evidence proving you fabricated the Ukraine whistleblower coordination and then lied about it on national television." Vance opened his first binder and declared, "For 5 years, Senator Schiff, you have been the single biggest leaker of classified intelligence in the United States Congress." He elaborated, "You systematically used your position on the Intelligence Committee to receive classified briefings, and then immediately leaked that information to friendly media outlets to damage President Trump." Vance looked directly at Schiff and said, "You didn't do it for oversight. You didn't do it to inform the public. You did it for fame, for money, for partisan political advantage, and you compromised national security doing it." He then announced, "Let me show this committee exactly what Adam Schiff has done." Schiff finally found his voice and protested, "This is outrageous. This is political retaliation for my oversight of Trump. This is the new administration, weaponizing intelligence agencies to go after their political opponents." Vance responded flatly, "This is evidence. Phone recordings, classified documents that leaked, articles that published them, financial records, and FISA warrants approved by federal judges." Vance continued, "You can call it whatever you want, but we are going to present what it actually is, proof that you committed espionage." Chairman Warner spoke up, his voice strained, saying, "Mr. Vice President, the committee was briefed yesterday on the broad outlines of this investigation, but hearing the actual recording is different. Before you continue, I need to ask how this call was intercepted and under what legal authority." NSA Director Mitchell answered, "The call was intercepted under a FISA warrant issued by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in June 2025. She explained that the warrant targeted individuals suspected of unauthorized contact with foreign intelligence services for the purpose of disclosing classified information, and Senator Schiff's communications were included based on probable cause that he was engaged in such activity." Senator Rubio asked, "A federal judge approved this? Approved surveillance of a sitting member of Congress?" FBI Director Wray replied, "3 federal judges approved it. The initial warrant and 2 renewals," Wray explained. "They reviewed extensive evidence showing a pattern of classified information appearing in the media immediately after Senator Schiff received it. They found probable cause that he was compromising national security." He added, "The standard for surveilling a member of Congress is extremely high. We met it." Vance looked at Schiff and said, "You spent 6 years positioning yourself as the guardian of classified intelligence, the watchdog protecting American secrets, the man who understood how important security was." Vance concluded, You were actually the threat. You were the leak. And today we are going to prove it with evidence you cannot spin away." He settled back in his chair and said, "Let's start with how we figured out it was you." And with those words, he began methodically destroying the carefully constructed image Adam Schiff had spent decades building. The serious lawmaker concerned with national security was about to be revealed as the biggest leaker in congressional history. To understand how we arrived here, how the man who had led Trump's impeachment ended up in a classified hearing facing espionage charges, one must go back 10 hours earlier, when Schiff walked into his office thinking this was just another routine oversight matter. 10 hours earlier, Adam Schiff sat in his Senate office, reviewing the subpoena that had been hand-delivered by the Sergeant-at-Arms the previous evening. The language was frustratingly vague. Subpoena to appear before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, classified session, subject matter, unauthorized disclosure of classified information, and related matters. That was the extent of it. There were no details about what specific information was involved, no indication of whether he was a witness or a subject, just a time of 5 p.m. and a location, SCIF Alpha, in the Capitol basement, along with a warning that failure to appear would result in contempt charges. His senior advisor, Daniel Goldman, sat across from him looking concerned. Goldman had been one of the lead lawyers during Trump's first impeachment and had worked closely with Schiff throughout that entire process, now serving as his top Senate aide on intelligence matters. "The language is unusual," Goldman said, scrolling through his tablet. "Normally, these subpoenas specify what they want to discuss, such as Chinese election interference, Russian cyber operations, or the Iranian nuclear program." Goldman added, "This just says unauthorized disclosure. That is vague enough to be anything." Schiff waved dismissively, though he felt a small flutter of unease, saying, "They are probably asking me about leaks I have investigated, or wanting my opinion on how to tighten security procedures." He reasoned, "I have been dealing with classified information for 15 years. I know how to handle these hearings. It is routine oversight." Goldman was not convinced and noted, "Vance personally requested to preside. The vice president doesn't normally attend Intelligence Committee hearings, and I heard NSA Director Mitchell is testifying, which is unusual for a routine session." Schiff said with confidence, "Vance is grandstanding. He wants to look tough on security, make it seem like he is cleaning up leaks or whatever." Schiff concluded, "I will testify, answer the relevant questions, and be done by dinner. This is political theater." He had every reason to be confident. He was Adam Schiff, the man who had become a household name during Trump's presidency, who had appeared on cable news more than almost any other member of Congress. He had led the first impeachment inquiry and become a hero to Democrats nationwide. And he had written a best-selling book about defending democracy that had been praised by major newspapers. Having just won a Senate seat with over 60% of the vote, every investigation he had been involved in, especially the Trump investigations, had made him more famous, more powerful, and more beloved by his base. His Twitter following was over 3 million. He was regularly featured in profiles about defending democracy, and he had become one of the most recognizable Democrats in America. Why would this hearing be any different from the dozens of classified briefings and testimonies he had participated in over the years? What Schiff did not know, and could not have imagined, was that for 18 months, the National Security Agency had been running a Level 1 counterintelligence investigation, not targeting Russian spies or Chinese hackers, but targeting him. This was because classified intelligence kept leaking to the media, and every single leak traced back to briefings he had attended. J.D. Vance had spent the last month reviewing every piece of evidence, preparing to present a case that would end Schiff's career and probably send him to prison. At that exact moment in the White House Situation Room, Vance was conducting his final preparation session. It was 7:00 the morning, and the secure conference room deep beneath the West Wing was filled with the nation's top intelligence officials. NSA Director General Sarah Mitchell stood at a large monitor, displaying a complex timeline. She was 53 years old, had spent 30 years in signals intelligence, and looked like someone who had seen things that kept her up at night. This case was one of them. "We have been investigating for 18 months, she began, clicking through her presentation. "It started when we noticed a pattern. Highly classified intelligence about Russia, Ukraine, China, and Iran kept appearing in New York Times and CNN articles within days of Intelligence Committee briefings," she continued. "The information was too accurate, too detailed to be speculation or educated guessing. Someone was leaking." She pulled up statistics, stating, "We identified 83 separate instances over 5 years where classified intelligence appeared in media shortly after committee briefings." She explained, "We cross-referenced attendance records for all those briefings. Multiple members attended some of them, but only one person attended all 83 briefings." She highlighted a name on the timeline, Adam Schiff, noting he served on the House Intelligence Committee from 2015 to 2023, became ranking member in 2019, then chairman, and moved to the Senate Intelligence Committee in 2023, giving him perfect access to classified briefings throughout the entire period. FBI Director Wray spoke up from his seat at the table, saying, "We needed to confirm it was actually him and not someone else who happened to attend the same briefings. So we obtained a FISA warrant 18 months ago." He explained, the predicate was probable cause that a member of Congress was engaged in unauthorized disclosure of classified information. He pulled up legal documents and said, "We showed the FISA court. The pattern of leaks showed that classified information was appearing in media with perfect timing and accuracy, and showed financial connections between Schiff and media companies." He emphasized 3 different federal judges, 1 for the initial warrant and 2 for renewals, all found probable cause. The standard for surveilling a member of Congress is extremely high, and these judges don't approve these lightly. "What did you find?" Vance asked. Though he had been briefed on this multiple times already, he wanted to hear it presented the way it would be in the hearing. Mitchell clicked to the next section and said, "We intercepted 17 phone calls over 12 months between Schiff and journalists. CNN's Jake Tapper involved 7 calls. New York Times reporters Adam Goldman and Julian Barnes involved 4 calls each, and Washington Post's Shane Harris involved 2 calls." She explained, "The pattern is always the same. Within 24 hours of a classified briefing, Schiff calls one of these journalists, tells them classified information, instructs them how to write the story, to disguise the source, and sometimes even suggests specific phrasing." She played a clip from one of the calls where Schiff's voice said, "Don't say Intelligence Committee members were told. Say, according to officials familiar with the intelligence. That is vague enough that it could be anyone? State Department, NSC, IC directly. It makes it harder to trace." Vance listened to the recording again. He had heard it a dozen times, but it never became less damning. "And you have matched the calls to specific articles that were published?" Vance asked. Director of National Intelligence Admiral Reynolds answered. He was a career naval officer, a former submarine commander, and had run the nation's intelligence apparatus for 3 years, looking disgusted by what they had found. "Every single call matches to an article published within 48 hours, Reynolds said. "We have the classified briefing material. We have the call recordings. We have the published articles. We can show that information went from the classified briefing to Schiff's brain, to the journalist's notes, to the published article in less than 2 days, repeatedly and systematically for 5 years. He pulled up examples. December 17th, 2019, classified briefing on Ukraine intelligence. December 18th, Schiff calls Jake Tapper. December 19th, CNN runs a story with specific details from that classified briefing, details that couldn't have come from anywhere else. He continued. March 2020, classified briefing on Russian election interference. Same day, Schiff calls Adam Goldman at the NYT. Next day, The Times runs a story with information from that briefing. A perfect match. He added, August 2021, classified briefing on Afghanistan, withdrawal intelligence. Schiff calls Shane Harris at the Washington Post. 2 days later, the Post runs a story describing classified intelligence assessments that were only shared in that briefing. He showed timeline after timeline, and the pattern was undeniable. Vance asked the key question. Can we prove he actually read from classified documents during these calls? Or could he argue he was just sharing his general impressions and the journalists filled in details from other sources? Mitchell had the answer. We can prove it. In 4 of the calls, we caught him reading verbatim from classified documents. She stated, We have the classified documents. We have the recordings of him reading them. And we have the articles that published those exact phrases. He wasn't paraphrasing. He was literally reading classified intelligence reports to journalists over the phone. She played another recording of Schiff's voice reading in a measured tone. The Intercept shows Russian officials discussing, quote, compromat on American political figures, end quote, with specific focus on, quote, leveraging financial relationships, end quote. Then she showed the classified document where the exact same phrases appeared, followed by the CNN article that ran 2 days later where the exact same phrasing appeared as well. That is not interpretation, Mitchell said. That is verbatim disclosure of classified intelligence. Vance turned to the next section and asked, What about the money? Reynolds pulled up financial records regarding the book deal. In early 2020, Warner Media, CNN's parent company at the time, gave Schiff a book deal worth a $2.1 million advance against future royalties, Reynolds explained. The book was published in late 2021, and it sold approximately 52,000 copies. That is a terrible return on a $2 million investment, as a book needs to sell several 100,000 copies to justify that kind of advance. He showed the publishing economics, noting Warner Media lost at least $1.5 million on this deal. Why would they do that? He asked. Because they weren't paying for a book. They were paying for access. Reynolds continued, Schiff became chairman of the House Intelligence Committee in January 2019. The leaks to CNN intensified dramatically starting then. He noted the book deal came in early 2020, and the leaks continued through 2023. The timing isn't coincidental, Reynolds said. Can we prove quid pro quo? Vance asked. Not in a criminal sense, Reynolds admitted. Schiff can argue it was a legitimate publishing deal that happened to lose money. But the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming, he argued. He got $2 million from a company whose news division he was regularly feeding classified intelligence. That is corruption, even if we can't prove an explicit agreement. Ray added another element. We also found that Democratic organizations and progressive advocacy groups bought tens of thousands of copies of his book in bulk. He listed Courage to Change, PAC bought 20,000 copies, Democratic Alliance bought 15,000, and several others bought thousands each. Total bulk purchases were approximately 80,000 copies. Ray explained, These bulk buys are how you launder money to politicians through book deals. The organizations buy books they don't need. The author gets royalties, and the money flows. Vance moved to the most explosive element, the Ukraine whistleblower. "Walk me through what you found," he said. Mitchell's expression darkened as she said, "This is where it goes from leaking to fabrication," she explained. The official story was that an intelligence community whistleblower filed a complaint through proper channels. The complaint went to the Inspector General, who forwarded it to Congress, and Schiff claimed he had no prior contact with the whistleblower. He said that repeatedly on television. She pulled up video clips of Schiff on CNN in September 2019, saying, "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. We would like to, but the whistleblower has a statutory right to remain anonymous." She showed another clip of Schiff on MSNBC saying, "The committee did not receive the complaint from the whistleblower. We learned about it through press reports," and another on ABC. "We have no prior knowledge of the contents of the whistleblower complaint." "All lies," Mitchell said bluntly. "We have phone records showing Schiff's staff contacted the whistleblower before the complaint was filed. Multiple calls," she explained. "They coordinated what should be in the complaint. They shaped it for maximum political impact. Then the whistleblower filed the complaint they had helped draft, and then Schiff went on TV and lied about having no prior contact." She showed the phone records. August 12, 2019, Schiff aide Daniel Goldman calls a number associated with a CIA analyst, later identified as the whistleblower. A 23-minute call. She listed others. August 14th, another call, 17 minutes. August 18th, another call. She noted, "These calls happened before the formal whistleblower complaint was filed on August 12th. That means Schiff's office was coordinating the complaint," Vance said. Then he lied about it to make it seem like it came from independent whistleblower channels rather than Democratic committee staff. "Exactly," Mitchell confirmed. "That is not oversight. That is fabricating the predicate for impeachment and then lying about it." They went through the full presentation once more, and the evidence was overwhelming. 17 recorded phone calls with journalists, 83 leaks matched to his briefings, 4 instances of reading verbatim from classified documents, a $2 million book deal from the media company he was leaking to, the Ukraine whistleblower coordination, and lies about the damage assessment showing compromised intelligence operations. Vance reviewed his notes and asked, "How do we present this to maximize impact?" Ray had thought through the strategy. Start with one undeniable call. Play the Jake Tapper recording about Ukraine and let his voice convict him immediately. He continued, "Show he can't deny it because we have the audio. Then show the pattern of 83 leaks over 5 years. Every single one traces to briefings he attended." He emphasized, "Make it clear this wasn't occasional sloppiness. This was systematic espionage." Ray went on. "Then the money, $2 million from CNN's parent company. Show the book economics don't make sense unless it was payment for leaking." He added, "Then the verbatim document reading. Show he wasn't just sharing impressions, he was literally reading classified documents to reporters." He concluded, "Then the whistleblower fabrication. Show he orchestrated the impeachment predicate, then lied about it. Finally, the damage assessment. Show he didn't just embarrass people, he compromised operations and got intelligence sources burned." Vance stood up and summarized. Adam Schiff spent 6 years as the most visible critic of Trump on intelligence matters, positioned himself as the serious, responsible lawmaker who understood how important protecting classified information was, and wrote a book about defending democracy. Vance concluded, the entire thing was a lie. He was the biggest security threat on the committee. He gathered his materials and said, "In 5 hours, we show the Senate exactly what he has done." At 4:30 that afternoon, Adam Schiff's motorcade arrived at the Capitol. He walked through security with Daniel Goldman beside him. Down to the basement level, through increasingly secure corridors to the SCIF entrance. A security officer checked his credentials and said, "You are cleared, Senator. Your aide needs to wait outside unless he has TS-SCI clearance for this session." Goldman didn't, and he looked at Schiff with concern, asking, "Are you sure you don't want me to try to get emergency clearance?" Schiff shook his head and replied, "It is fine. This is standard procedure for classified sessions. I will be out in an hour." He entered the skiff, and the heavy vault door closed behind him with a solid thud that seemed far too final. The room was already full with committee members in their seats, but also people who shouldn't be there for a routine hearing. J.D. Vance, sitting at the head of the table, the NSA director, the FBI director, and the DNI, all with binders in front of them. Something was very, very wrong. At exactly 5, Vance called the hearing to order, his voice formal and serious. "This classified session of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence is now in session," he announced. "Everything discussed here is classified. Top secret sensitive compartmented information. Unauthorized disclosure is a federal crime." He looked directly at Schiff and said, "Senator Schiff, you have been read your rights, and you understand you are here to answer questions regarding unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence. Before we begin, do you have any questions about the proceeding?" Schiff's throat felt dry as he said, "I would like to have my counsel present. Your counsel does not have appropriate clearances for the material we will be discussing," Vance said. "You may request a delay while they obtain clearances, which typically take 6 to 8 weeks. Or, we can proceed now. A delay would look terrible and would make him seem guilty." So Schiff made a decision he would regret. "I will proceed." "Very well," Vance said, opening his first binder. "For 18 months, the National Security Agency has been investigating systematic, unauthorized disclosure of classified intelligence to news media." He continued, "We have identified 83 separate leaks over 5 years, and we have traced all of them to one source." He paused, letting the statement hang there. Schiff felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. "Let me show you how we know," Vance said. "Let's start with December 18th, 2019, your phone call to Jake Tapper." And with those words, Schiff knew his career was over. Vance looked at Schiff across the table and said, "Senator, before I play this recording, I will give you an opportunity to explain. On December 18th, 2019, the day after you received a classified briefing on Ukraine intelligence, you had a phone conversation with Jake Tapper of CNN. What did you discuss?" Schiff's mind raced. December 2019 was during impeachment, and he had spoken with lots of journalists then, all above board, all part of his oversight duties. "I spoke with many journalists during that period about impeachment. Those were appropriate communications about public matters," Schiff replied. "This wasn't about public matters," Vance said. "This was about classified intelligence you had received the day before in a restricted briefing. But let me let you hear it yourself." He pressed play, and the recording was crystal clear. Professional quality NSA intercept technology was the best in the world, and it showed Schiff's own voice filling the room. "Jake, what I am about to tell you is highly classified, but the American people need to know. The intelligence on Ukraine is damning." The recording continued. "Trump personally pressured Zelensky to investigate Biden. We have intercepts. We have testimony from intelligence community officials. The evidence is overwhelming. This is worse than what we have said publicly." Schiff felt sick. That was his voice on a recording, saying things he absolutely remembered saying, things he thought were private. Jake Tapper's voice asked, "Can I report this? Can I attribute it?" Schiff's voice replied, "Not attributed to me directly. Use sources familiar with the intelligence or officials who have seen the classified briefings. Schiff instructed, I will confirm on background if your editors need verification before running it. But this needs to get out before the Senate trial starts. The American people need to understand what Trump actually did. Tapper said, I can work with that. When can we air it? Schiff answered, tonight if possible, tomorrow at the latest. The Senate vote is coming, and this information could matter. Vance stopped the playback, and the silence was deafening. That is you, Vance said simply, leaking classified intelligence to CNN, instructing the journalist how to disguise you as an anonymous source, coordinating timing to influence the Senate impeachment trial. He added, all on December 18th, 2019, one day after you received that classified intelligence in a secure briefing. Senator Warner spoke up, his voice pained, asking, Mr. Vice President, I need to understand the legal basis for this recording. How was this call intercepted? NSA Director Mitchell answered, the call was intercepted, pursuant to a FISA warrant issued by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in June 2025. The warrant targeted individuals suspected of unauthorized disclosure of classified information based on a pattern of classified intelligence appearing in media immediately after Senator Schiff received briefings. She noted, 3 federal judges found probable cause to authorize surveillance. Senator Angus King, the independent from Maine, asked, 3 judges approved surveilling a sitting senator? FBI Director Wray confirmed, 3 judges reviewed extensive evidence and all found probable cause that he was compromising national security. The initial warrant and 2 renewals. Wray emphasized, the standard is extremely high for surveilling a member of Congress. We met it because the pattern was undeniable. Vance brought the focus back to Schiff. Senator, that recording is from December 2019. Would you like to know when CNN aired a story with that exact classified information? He didn't wait for an answer but pulled up a transcript. December 19th, 2019, CNN Evening News. Jake Tapper reporting, quote, according to officials familiar with classified intelligence briefings, evidence regarding President Trump's Ukraine communications is more damaging than previously reported. The intelligence includes intercepts and testimony from intelligence community officials. End quote. He looked up and said, that aired less than 24 hours after your phone call. The language mirrors what you told him. The sourcing is exactly what you suggested. Officials familiar with the intelligence. Vance stated, you leaked classified information, told him how to hide, that you were the source, and it aired the next day. Schiff tried to respond, saying, that story was about public impeachment matters. I was helping the public understand. You were disclosing classified intelligence. Vance cut him off. The intercepts you mentioned, the testimony from IC officials, that was all classified. You received it in a classified briefing. You disclosed it to a journalist, and that is a crime. He paused and said, and that is just one call. Let me show you the others. Vance clicked his remote, and a timeline appeared on the secure monitor at the front of the room. 5 years of data compressed into a visual representation that was damning in its clarity. For 18 months, Vance said, NSA and FBI analyzed patterns of classified intelligence leaking to media. We identified 83 separate instances where classified information appeared in news articles shortly after Intelligence Committee briefings. He said, let me show you the pattern, and traced along the timeline. Each red dot represents a classified briefing. Each blue dot represents a news article containing information from that briefing. Notice anything? The pattern was obvious. Red dot, then blue dot 1 to 3 days later, over and over for 5 years. Classified briefing, then immediately to media, repeatedly, systematically, for 5 years straight, Vance said. We cross-referenced attendance records. Who attended these 83 briefings? Multiple members attended some of them, but only one person attended all 83. He didn't need to say the name. Everyone knew. You were on the House Intelligence Committee from 2015 to 2023, became ranking member in 2019, chairman in 2020 through 2022, then moved to Senate Intelligence Committee in 2023. Perfect access throughout this entire period. He showed specific examples. The 15th of March 2020, classified briefing on Russian election interference. You attended. March 16th, you called Adam Goldman at New York Times. March 17th, Times publishes story with specific details from that classified briefing. Details that could only have come from someone in the room. Another example, July 2021, classified briefing on Chinese cyber operations against U.S. infrastructure. You attended. Same day you called Jake Tapper again. Next day, CNN runs story describing Chinese capabilities that were only discussed in that classified briefing. Another, August 2021, classified briefing on Afghanistan withdrawal intelligence. You attended. You called Shane Harris at Washington Post. 2 days later, Post runs story with classified intelligence assessments that were restricted to that briefing. He kept going, example after example, and the pattern was undeniable. Briefing, call, article, briefing, call, article. Over and over, 83 times over 5 years. Senator Schiff, classified intelligence, moved from the secure briefing room to your phone, to a friendly journalist, to a published article in less than 72 hours. That is not coincidence. That is systematic leaking. Senator Rubio asked, Mr. Vice President, how certain are we that the information in these articles came from Senator Schiff, and not from someone else who attended the same briefings? Mitchell answered, we are certain, because we have the phone records showing him calling journalists immediately after briefings. We have 17 recorded calls where he discloses the information, and we have 4 calls where he reads verbatim from classified documents. She added, we can match his words to the documents, to the articles. It is not circumstantial, it is direct evidence. Vance showed the call records. Here is Senator Schiff's phone activity on days when he attended classified briefings. Notice the pattern, he pointed out. Within hours of leaving the SCIF, he is calling CNN, New York Times, Washington Post. The calls average 12 to 20 minutes. He argued, that is not scheduling lunch. That is briefing journalists on what he just learned. He pulled up comparison data. Here is his call pattern on days when he didn't attend classified briefings. Totally different. Normal calls to staff, constituents, family, but on days with classified briefings, calls to journalists immediately after, Vance concluded. Senator Susan Collins asked quietly, over 5 years, how many times did this pattern occur? 83 times that we can definitively document, Vance said. There may be more we haven't identified, but these are the ones where the evidence is absolutely clear. Vance moved to his most damning evidence. Senator Schiff could argue that he was just sharing his general impressions of briefings, his interpretation of events. That would still be inappropriate, but he might claim it is not technically leaking classified documents. He said, let me show you why that defense doesn't work, and pulled up a classified document on the secure screen. Most of it was redacted for the public, but portions of the record had key phrases highlighted. This is a classified intelligence assessment from March 2020 regarding Russian election interference. It was briefed to the House Intelligence Committee on March 15th and Senator Schiff attended that briefing. Vance continued, "The next day, he called Adam Goldman at the New York Times. NSA intercepted that call, so let me play you part of it." The recording played Schiff's voice reading in a careful, measured tone. The assessment states that Russian intelligence services are, quote, actively engaged in information operations targeting the 2020 election, end quote, with specific focus on, quote, amplifying existing divisions within the American electorate, end quote. Schiff continued on the tape. The report identifies, quote, coordination between Russian military intelligence and social media influence operations, end quote. Vance stopped the recording, then pointed to the classified document on screen. Those phrases appeared in this classified assessment. Actively engaged in information operations targeting the 2020 election, amplifying existing divisions, and coordination between Russian military intelligence and social media influence operations. He showed a New York Times article from March 17, 2020, and those exact phrases appeared in this Times article published 2 days after his call. He didn't paraphrase, he didn't summarize. He read verbatim from a classified document to a reporter. Then that reporter published it. Senator King looked stunned, saying, "He was literally reading classified documents over the phone to journalists?" "We have 4 separate calls where he did exactly that," Mitchell confirmed. "We have matched his words to classified documents to published articles. This wasn't him sharing his opinion about what intelligence meant. This was him disclosing classified intelligence word for word." Vance showed another example. June 2021, classified briefing on Iranian nuclear program. He called Shane Harris at Washington Post. Vance said, "Listen to this," and played another recording of Schiff's voice. "The intelligence indicates Iran has, quote, accelerated enrichment activities at the Fordo facility, end quote, reaching, quote, 60% enrichment levels, end quote, which the assessment describes as, quote, significantly reducing breakout time to weapons-grade material, end quote. The classified document appeared with the exact phrases highlighted, followed by a Washington Post article with those same phrases. 4 times we caught him doing this, Vance said. Reading classified assessments to reporters, those reporters publishing it, compromising intelligence sources and methods. He asked, for what? So he could be on TV? So he could damage Trump? So he could position himself as the serious intelligence expert? He looked at Schiff and said, "You weren't protecting national security. You were the threat to national security." Vance shifted to the money. Let's talk about why Senator Schiff was leaking. Ideology was part of it. He opposed Trump and wanted to damage him. But there was another motivation, financial. He said he was getting paid and pulled up publishing contracts. In February 2020, Warner Media, which at that time owned CNN, gave Senator Schiff a book deal. The advance was $2.1 million. Vance explained, "For those unfamiliar with publishing, that is a massive advance. That is the kind of deal you give to presidents or major celebrities, not members of Congress." He showed the book, noting, "The book was published in October 2021, called Midnight in Washington, How We Almost Lost Our Democracy and Still Could. It sold approximately 52,000 copies in its first year." Vance commented, "That is actually decent for a political book, but nowhere near enough to justify a $2 million advance." D&I Reynolds walked through the economics. A hardcover book typically retails for $28 to $30. The author gets roughly 15% of that, so about $4 per book. He calculated, to earn back a $2 million advance, the book would need to sell 500,000 copies. Senator Schiff's book sold roughly 1/10 of that. Reynolds concluded, Warner Media lost approximately $1.5 million on this deal. Senator Warner asked, That is not unusual, though, is it? Publishers often overpay for political books, betting they will become bestsellers. True, Reynolds acknowledged, but consider the timing. He noted, Schiff became chairman of House Intelligence Committee in January 2019. That is when the leaks to CNN intensified dramatically. He pointed out the book deal came in February 2020, 14 months into his chairmanship, and the leaks continued through 2022. Then he left House Intelligence Committee, and the CNN leaks dropped off significantly. Reynolds showed the correlation. We tracked CNN stories, citing anonymous intelligence officials during Schiff's chairmanship. 2019 to 2022, CNN ran an average of 37 such stories per year. He contrasted this. After he left the committee, that dropped to 9 per year. Vance stated, The pattern is clear. CNN was getting classified intelligence from him. They paid him $2 million for a book that lost money, he asserted. That wasn't a publishing deal. That was payment for services rendered. Vance added more evidence. We also found that Democratic political organizations bought bulk copies of his book, Courage to Change. PAC bought 20,000 copies for $85,000, never distributed most of them. He continued, Democracy Alliance bought 15,000 copies. Several other progressive groups bought thousands each. Total bulk purchases approximately 80,000 copies. Vance explained, These bulk buys inflate sales numbers and guarantee the author hits royalty thresholds, even if regular readers don't buy the book. It is how you launder money to politicians through book deals. He summarized, The organizations buy books with donor money. The author gets royalties. Everyone pretends it is legitimate publishing. Senator Cotton asked, Are you alleging CNN explicitly paid him to leak classified intelligence? We cannot prove explicit quid pro quo, Vance admitted. But the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. He reasoned, he becomes intelligence chairman, starts leaking heavily to CNN, gets a $2 million book deal from CNN's parent company, continues leaking, leaves the committee, and CNN's access to leaks dries up. That is not coincidence. Vance moved to his final major evidence section. Everything we have discussed so far is about leaking, unauthorized disclosure, serious crimes, but Senator Schiff might argue he was trying to inform the public about Trump's misconduct. Vance said, Let me show you where it went beyond leaking into active fabrication and lying. He pulled up video clips from September 2019 regarding the Ukraine whistleblower complaint that launched Trump's first impeachment. Here is what Senator Schiff said about it on national television. Vance introduced. The clips played. Schiff on CNN, September 21, 2019, saying, We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower. Schiff on MSNBC, September 23, saying, The committee did not receive the complaint from the whistleblower. We learned about it through press reports. Schiff on ABC, September 25, saying, We have no prior knowledge of the contents of the whistleblower complaint. Vance stopped the montage and said, He said that repeatedly. No contact with the whistleblower, no prior knowledge, found out through press reports. Vance declared, All lies. FBI Director Wray presented the evidence. We have phone records showing that Senator Schiff's staff contacted the individual later identified as the whistleblower before the formal complaint was filed. Multiple calls between Schiff aide Daniel Goldman and the CIA analyst. Phone records appeared on screen. August 12, 2019. Goldman calls number associated with the analyst. 23-minute call. August 14th, another call. 17 minutes. August 18th, another call. 19 minutes. These calls occurred before the whistleblower complaint was officially filed on August 12th. Wait, that couldn't be right. Vance corrected himself. The complaint was filed August 12th. Apologies, Ray corrected himself. The first call was August 8th. The formal complaint was filed August 12th. So these calls happened in the days immediately before and after the complaint was filed. Ray concluded. Goldman was coordinating with the whistleblower, helping shape the complaint. He showed more evidence. We also have text messages between Goldman and the analyst discussing what should be included in the complaint. Goldman suggesting specific language, specific facts to emphasize. He argued, this wasn't the committee passively receiving a whistleblower complaint through proper channels. This was committee staff actively creating the complaint, then pretending it came independently. Senator Collins looked shocked and asked, so the entire predicate for impeachment was fabricated by Chairman Schiff's staff? Fabricated is strong, Ray said carefully. The underlying facts about Trump's Ukraine call were real. But the whistleblower complaint wasn't organic. It was coordinated by Schiff's staff to create the appearance of an independent intelligence community whistleblower coming forward. Then Schiff went on television and lied about having no prior contact, Ray added. Vance played more clips of Schiff on CNN, being asked directly if his staff had spoken to the whistleblower, and Schiff responding, "We have no knowledge of that," claiming the whistleblower came forward through proper channels to the Inspector General. That is not spinning, Vance said. That is not putting the best face on things. That is lying. Direct, explicit lying to the American people about his staff coordinating the impeachment complaint. For his final section, Vance brought in DNI Reynolds to describe the actual harm caused by Schiff's leaking. We conducted a comprehensive damage assessment, Reynolds said, looking at what intelligence was compromised by Senator Schiff's disclosures. He noted, the results are classified, so I can only speak generally, but the damage was significant. He outlined categories of harm. First, sources and methods. When he leaked details about intercepts, foreign governments learned we had access to their communications, and several intelligence collection operations had to be terminated because they were compromised by his leaks. Second, diplomatic relationships. Allied intelligence services share information with us under strict confidentiality agreements, and when that information appeared in New York Times articles, our allies lost trust. Several liaison relationships were damaged. Third, operational security. When he leaked details about planned operations or intelligence assessments, adversaries gained advanced warning, and at least 2 counterterrorism operations had to be canceled because he leaked details that would have exposed our intentions. Fourth, intelligence community morale. Analysts and operators risk their lives collecting intelligence, and when they see it immediately leaked to media by the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, it is devastating. Reynolds stated, we had analysts refuse to brief Congress because they didn't trust the information would stay classified. Reynolds looked at Schiff and said, you didn't just break the law, Senator. You damaged the intelligence community's ability to protect this country. He accused, you burned sources. You compromised operations. You destroyed Allied trust. For what? For TV appearances and a book deal? The room was silent, and the evidence was overwhelming. 17 recorded calls, 83 documented leaks, reading verbatim from classified documents, 2 million from CNN, lying about the whistleblower, and massive damage to national security. Schiff sat frozen, his face pale, unable to respond to any of it. 4 hours of evidence. Phone recordings of Schiff's voice leaking to journalists, a timeline showing 83 leaks matched to his briefings, proof he read classified documents verbatim to reporters, financial records showing CNN paid him $2 million, proof he fabricated the whistleblower coordination, then lied about it, and a damage assessment showing burned sources and compromised operations. It was devastating, undeniable, career-ending at minimum, and prison-worthy most likely. Chairman Warner looked at Schiff with something like pity and said, "Senator Schiff, you have heard 4 hours of evidence from NSA, FBI, and DNI. You have an opportunity to respond. What do you have to say?" Schiff sat silent for a long moment. His mind was racing through options. Deny it? They had recordings of his voice. Claim it was taken out of context? They had 83 examples. Say he was helping the public? He disclosed classified intelligence. That is a crime, regardless of motivation. Finally, he spoke, his voice lacking its usual confidence. This is political retaliation. This is the new administration weaponizing intelligence agencies to punish me for conducting oversight of Donald Trump. He argued, "Everything I did was in service of my constitutional duty to inform the American people about threats to our democracy." "You leaked classified intelligence," Vance interrupted flatly. "We have you on tape doing it, 17 times. That is not oversight. That is espionage." Schiff's voice rose, getting defensive. "I was trying to protect American democracy from a president who was compromised by Russia." "By committing crimes yourself?" Vance asked. "By reading classified NSA intercepts to CNN? By taking $2 million from Warner Media while feeding them classified information?" Vance retorted. "You weren't protecting anything. You were advancing your career and your bank account." Senator Rubio spoke up. "Senator Schiff, I want to give you a chance to address the specific allegations." He asked, "Did you call Jake Tapper on December 18th, 2019, and disclose classified Ukraine intelligence?" Silence. Schiff looked at the table. Rubio continued, "Did you receive a $2 million book deal from CNN's parent company while leaking classified information to CNN?" More silence. "Did your staff coordinate with the Ukraine whistleblower before the complaint was filed? Then did you lie about having no prior contact?" Schiff finally looked up, his voice quiet. "I need to consult with counsel before answering these questions." "Your counsel isn't here," Warner reminded him gently. "We can delay." "No." Schiff's voice was firmer. "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. I decline to answer on grounds that my answers might incriminate me." The room erupted. The implications were staggering. A sitting senator taking the Fifth when asked about leaking classified intelligence. Vance waited for quiet, then asked a series of rapid-fire questions. "Did you leak classified intelligence to journalists?" Fifth Amendment. "Did you read from classified documents during phone calls with reporters?" Fifth Amendment. "Did you receive payment from media companies you were leaking to?" Fifth Amendment. "Did you lie about coordinating the Ukraine whistleblower?" Fifth Amendment. Vance sat back and stated, "Let the record show that Senator Schiff has invoked the Fifth Amendment rather than answer questions about his leaking of classified intelligence." Senator Cotton spoke up, his voice hard. "Mr. Vice President, based on the evidence presented, I move that this committee recommend the full Senate vote on expulsion of Senator Schiff for conduct unbecoming a member and for compromising national security." Second, Senator Rubio said immediately. Warner looked pained but nodded, saying, "The motion is in order. We will vote after a brief discussion." The discussion was brief. Even Democrats on the committee couldn't defend the evidence. Senator King from Maine, an independent who caucused with Democrats, spoke for many of them. "I have known Adam Schiff for years. I respected his work on the Intelligence Committee, but this evidence is overwhelming." King said, "If a member of the Intelligence Committee is systematically leaking classified information, taking money from media companies, and lying about whistleblower coordination, They cannot continue to serve. I will vote for expulsion." The vote was unanimous, 15-0 to recommend expulsion. Warner looked at Schiff and said, "Senator, the full Senate will vote on your expulsion based on this evidence. I expect it will pass with a large bipartisan majority, so you should consider resigning before that vote." Schiff stood up, his legs shaky, and said, "This is the end of democracy, when speaking truth becomes a crime, when oversight is punished. When senators leak classified intelligence for money and fame, they go to prison," Vance said quietly. "That is not the end of democracy. That is the rule of law." As Schiff left the skiff, FBI agents were waiting in the corridor. "Adam Schiff, you are under arrest for unauthorized disclosure of classified information, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and making false statements to Congress," an agent declared. The handcuffs went on, and Miranda rights were read. The senator who had been the face of Trump resistance was walked out of the Capitol in handcuffs. Within hours, the news leaked. Not the classified details, but enough. Senator Adam Schiff, arrested on espionage charges. FBI cites systematic leaking to CNN and NYT. Took Fifth Amendment on all questions. By morning, it was the biggest story in America. The Democratic hero arrested for leaking secrets. Even progressive media struggled to defend him. The evidence was too strong, and taking the Fifth made him look guilty, while the recordings of his voice were undeniable. The Senate didn't wait. Within a week, they voted on expulsion, and the final tally was 78-22, as even many Democrats voted to expel because the evidence was too damning. Schiff's criminal trial began in April 2027. The prosecution presented the phone recordings, the matched leaks, the financial records, and the whistleblower lies, all of it. His defense tried everything, claimed he was exercising oversight duties, claimed the First Amendment protected his communications with the press, claimed it was political persecution. None of it worked. The jury heard his voice leaking classified intelligence, saw the $2 million from CNN, and heard him lie about the whistleblower. Guilty on 12 counts. Unauthorized disclosure of classified information, conspiracy, and false statements. Sentencing took place in August 2027. The judge showed no sympathy, stating, "Mr. Schiff, you held one of the most sensitive positions in our government, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and member of the Senate Intelligence Committee." The judge continued, "You had access to our nation's most important secrets, and you swore an oath to protect those secrets. You violated that oath systematically for 5 years. The judge admonished, "You leaked classified intelligence to advance your political career. You took money from media companies while feeding them secrets. You lied to Congress and the American people about whistleblower coordination. You damaged intelligence operations. You burned sources, and you compromised our relationships with allies." The judge concluded, "You did all of this while positioning yourself as the guardian of democracy. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison." The judge ordered, "You will serve this sentence at a facility designated by the Bureau of Prisons, and you are permanently barred from holding any federal position." Adam Schiff entered federal prison in October 2027 at USP Lee in Virginia. He is still there, and with good behavior, he is eligible for release in 2038, at age 78. His legacy is destroyed, not remembered as Trump's brave opponent, but remembered as a traitor who leaked secrets for money and fame. The lesson resonated through Washington. You can oppose presidents, you can investigate them, you can vote to impeach them, but you cannot leak classified intelligence. You cannot take money from media while feeding them secrets, and you cannot lie about fabricating whistleblower complaints. Eventually, the NSA will catch you. Eventually, your voice will be on recordings, and eventually the evidence will be undeniable. Adam Schiff thought he was untouchable, thought his media platform protected him, and thought being the resistance hero made him safe. He was wrong. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury convicted him, and he is spending 15 years in prison because he thought leaking secrets was just politics. It wasn't politics. It was espionage. And espionage has consequences.